My name's Oscar, as Andy was saying. I'm 22. I currently live in Newcastle, work up there, and I went to Bryanston between 2012 and 2015. Didn't quite make it the full 5 years, yeah. But after I left Bryanston, I went to Newcastle University. After 6 months at university, I dropped out. I dropped out for several reasons, which I'll delve into a little bit later. But I dropped out of university, and then I founded a mental health support service, which is called Street Talk. And so in my talk today, I'm going to share my experience, my journey through school, university, and beyond. Hopefully it can be of use to some of you, because I know you're about to apply for universities and stuff like that. So let's start with school. When I first arrived at Bryanston and moved into Cranbourne, I always wondered why the girls got into House of the Year above straight away and the boys didn't. When I moved into Cranbourne, I completely understood why they separated. We needed a year of character building before being thrown into the lion's den with the year aboves. There was an immediate sense of bond between the lads in the house. Having Mr. Vincent as housemaster really helped to keep us in check. And obviously when you're living in such close quarters with lads, you build a long-lasting relationship. Zach's still one of my best mates. And obviously with that many lads, most just hitting puberty at that time, living in one space, there's always going to be conflict. It's very easy to slip to like the bottom of the pack and get into a bit of a rut. At the time, you might think the world's caving in around you. I certainly did at times. School's obviously a very intense environment. It's important to have support around you when times get tough. So at Bryanston, I remember there being amazing pastoral care, not only from the teachers, but also old years who took prep. I remember after like an argument in Cranbourne, one of the old years took, do you guys take prep at the moment? Yeah, how do you find that? Is that all right? Yeah, it's good, bit of fun. So one of the old years took me to the side, chatted me through an argument, and listened to what I had to say. He didn't know me, probably didn't even know my name, but he calmed me down and assured me it would be okay. Just having that one conversation stopped what could have manifested into a much larger problem. So after a very, very fun D year, it's time to move into C and into the lion's den. So I moved into Dorset, where obviously Mr. Beals was my housemaster. C and B were tough years for me. As much as I had a lot of fun, I made a lot of friends, I began to struggle with emotions that I was feeling. My grades started slipping, sport declined a lot, and home life wasn't great. So I began to fall into a rut of not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, and I was doing everything half-assed. I didn't really have a purpose. I'll explain a bit more about this later on. So this is around the time that I started to have suicidal thoughts. I've never actually publicly spoken about the thoughts I had back then. It confused me as to why I was feeling like this. On paper, my life was pretty damn good. Went to a really good school, went on holidays every year, had a great bunch of mates. I rarely went without, to be honest. But despite all this, I had a really deep sense of lack of fulfillment. And at only 15, 16 years old, you might just think it might be hormonal, but it's just a blip. But you know, they're dangerous thoughts to have as a young man in a big world. I never spoke to anyone about how I felt. Not my friends, teachers, family, or even my parents. And looking back now, this only prolonged how I felt. I bottled it up and cracked on as if everything was fine. Skip on to university. So I moved to Newcastle, fresh off a gap year, drinking copious amounts of Thai beer. I'd strongly recommend going to Thailand if you're going to go a gap year. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. So I arrived at university, ready for a fresh start. Excited to be in a new city. Only a few people from Bryanston actually ended up at Newcastle, so we were immediately sort of set out and finding new mates. I don't think I'd actually even made my bed before we were straight out, drinking, having a laugh. I absolutely loved it. Newcastle was insane, like incredible. Best way I can describe uni life, it's basically like boarding school with no rules and no school. It's like amazing. So there was no Mr. Beals telling me I needed to be back in house by 10 p.m, no Mr. Bolton shaking his head from afar as I tried to chat up a girl at dinner. I don't think I even found my lecture hall until the third week. And as I delved deeper into uni life, I had so many amazing experiences, gained more friends and confidence, but again, something was missing. I started to slip back into the same mindset that I had back when I was 16. This time, however, it presented itself as anxiety. How many of you guys have experienced anxiety at some point in your lives? If you want to just chuck your hand up. Yeah? I'd say probably like most people. It's not very nice. It's sort of the feeling of like the whole world's caving in around you. Could even be like panic attacks. There were literally times where I'd be sat on my bed just like clutching my phone. My anxiety was sort of mostly like health anxiety related, so I'd literally think that I was like about to die if I had like a cough or something like that. So I'd be literally just sat on the bed like clutching my phone about to call 999. Whether it was from like a sudden heart attack, a brain tumour, I'd literally be frantically like Googling on WebMD to figure out what was wrong with me. It was pretty exhausting. And it's strange when you have such a fear of death that it drives you to the point of not wanting to be alive anymore. Again, I didn't reach out for help and I didn't speak to anyone about it. I didn't voice what I was feeling. I just kept it to myself and thought no one wanted to hear what I was going through. I thought they'd probably just think I'm being ridiculous or think I'm messed up in some way. I had no motivation to do any uni work. And again, I questioned what my purpose was. It's tricky as a young adult to find purpose. There's so many opportunities and it can be quite overwhelming when you're being pushed from loads of different directions, school, social media, society, they all have their say and it's really hard. So I decided to drop out of university, about 6 months in. Surprisingly easy to do so. Just a few emails exchanged, not a single question from the university as to why I was dropping out. I was no longer enrolled. I kept my student ID, so I get my free cheeseburger from McDonald's there, so that's a bit of a perk. I began working at a bar in Newcastle with the intention of going back to uni the year after to start a new course. Then the pandemic hit. For many people, pandemic brought a lot of uncertainty. I'm sure it did for you guys. Must have been hard in school. But it was something I was very used to, and to be honest, it couldn't have come at a better time for me. Initially, it sparked a lot of anxiety, obviously with the sort of health kind of thing. But once I was out sunbathing, just like watching a bit of Tiger King, I was pretty content. Joe Wicks, all that kind of stuff. I started to get a bit bored though, so I decided to do one of those online courses at an open university. It was only about a week long, and it was in counselling skills. So I'd been to counselling before. My parents got divorced, so I knew roughly sort of how counselling worked. I started reading, which to put it quite bluntly, I'd never done before. No matter how much Miss Boozman tried, she couldn't quite get me to read The Tempest or Much Ado About Nothing. She was a great teacher. I understand, is her daughter in here tonight? There we go, amazing. She was a great teacher. So I decided to pick up a book called 12 Rules for Life. The book was written by a psychotherapist, lecturer, and public speaker called Jordan Peterson. The basic philosophy of the book was essentially to kind of get a grip of your life and really get out there and do something, which is exactly what I needed to hear at the time. So I took this philosophy quite literally. I decided to go back up to Newcastle and have a bit of brainstorm. So I knew I wanted to help others that were struggling with their mental health, but I didn't quite know how. I didn't have any real qualifications. I just dropped out of uni, I didn't have any money. I kept thinking, and then it suddenly hit me. I thought, what if I could organise a system in which young people could talk to other young people about their mental health in a completely non-judgmental, anonymous way. No scary doctor's appointments, no Googling on the internet for misleading information, and no forced group meetings. Just young people having a chat with other young people about how they're feeling. All they had to do was just pick up the phone. Personally, I found it really hard to talk to my parents, friends and family about how I felt because I didn't want them to worry. It leaves you trapped and you end up just suffering on your own. I wanted to create a system in which someone who was in the same place that I was in back when I was 16 could reach out for help at the touch of a button with no worries about what people might think. So I decided to set up Street Talk in October 2020. So Street Talk would be an anonymous helpline where people could call up free of charge every day of the week between 6 p.m. and midnight and speak about whatever that was on their minds. People could literally call up about anything. I wanted it to be like having a chat with someone on the street, someone kind of like even just your mates, someone you're having a coffee with. So I began recruiting people. Most of them were young, most of them were students. I developed a training course for the call handlers, which made sure that they were fully equipped to deal with any call. So I then set up a switchboard, which would mean that people could call up and it would be redirected to volunteers who were on shift, and it would be completely anonymous, both ends. You wouldn't know who you were speaking to, we wouldn't know who was calling. And so we opened Street Talk in February this year, so we haven't been going that long. We've since been open between the hours of 6 p.m. midnight every single night, and anyone in the UK can call up completely for free and speak with us for as long as they need. Whilst I was nervously sat by my laptop on the first night of opening the lines, I was praying that someone would ring the phone. And you might think that it sounds strange hoping that someone calls a mental health helpline, but in my head I thought, if they don't call us, will they ever speak to anyone? We received 3 calls that night. And after we closed the line for that evening, I went to bed and I cried my eyes out. I cried because those people chose to reach out for a chat, for help and support, something that I'd never had the courage to do. I admired their bravery more than anything. It takes balls to pick up a phone and call a number you don't know who will pick up. I spoke before a little bit about purpose. I think we all have a purpose. You know, we're all remarkable creatures and we all have something to offer the world. You might not think it now, I certainly didn't at your age, but you should never underestimate the hole that your absence in the world would leave. To me, purpose is finding a reason to get up in the morning, to find something meaningful that makes life worthwhile. It could be anything, it could be painting, running, writing, talking, like whatever it is. Just pick something and make it yours. I used to think of school as pointless and boring, but now I look back and I realised it was exposing me to a bit of everything. So I could then go out and pick exactly what I wanted to do. You don't need to have it all figured out now. I still don't. But I can tell you from experience, the best antidote to any pain that you're suffering is to do something worthwhile. Find your reason to get out of bed in the morning and stick with it. I urge you to reach out for help if you're struggling. Speak up and don't look back. Whether you're asking a mate at a rugby match or sitting someone down for a coffee, ask them, how are you? Ask them twice, so you know that they mean it, so they know you mean it. Or just say to your mates, you know, like, I'm here for you if you need me. It might just be exactly what they needed to hear. Street Talk lines, they're open every single night of the year. Our trained volunteers will never judge you. They'll never tell you what to do. They'll listen and hear what you have to say. And if you need advice on what to do after, if you want further support, we'll give it to you. Thank you for listening. Has anyone got any questions? Do you want to ask it? Yeah.
Where did you find your band of volunteers?
So we ended up recruiting the volunteers. What we did is we just reached out within Newcastle initially to find the volunteers. So we posted on like forums, stuff like that, just advertising, being like, do you want to get involved with it? We didn't necessarily specifically say what it was, but we put them through an interview process, which is usually about a week long, and then we put them through a 7-week intensive training course where they get exposed to everything on the spectrum, everything from someone who's just had like a bad breakup to someone who's about to jump off a bridge, that kind of thing. So they're completely trained up in every single spectrum. Once they do that, they then go through scenario calls, so we get actors to call them, and we expose them to kind of how the calls would be. They know it's a mock call, but they still sort of treat it as a real call. And then once they've done that, they're fully ready to be answering calls. So all the call handlers are all volunteers, so they don't get paid, which is great. Saves us a lot of money. And to be honest, it's not actually that expensive to start up something like this. This is what I'm saying, like, about finding a purpose and finding something that's like you're interested in. Even if you haven't got any money and experience, anything like that, it's so surprisingly easy to do it. It took me probably about a month or 2 of just like planning, and then a further kind of 3 or 4 months of just like training people up to get this started. We started out with 30 volunteers, and now we've got about 150. And that was all within the space of like 6 months. So it's surprisingly easy. But with regard to the finance, so it's paid for by another art business that I run. So that essentially pays for it. But it costs us, I think, our running costs every month are probably about 50 quid a month. to run the helpline, to run some marketing. But obviously that's going to increase as we go out. We'll get funding. So basically the way it works is you've got to apply for CIC status, which is the one just before you become a charity. You can start fundraising, so we're going to do loads of fundraising events, that kind of stuff. And then you can use the money just to like expose, so marketing, that sort of stuff. But it's surprisingly cheap to run. I know a lot of kind of universities have support systems in place, so they've got. Have you guys ever heard of Nightline? Anyone heard of Nightline? Yeah, a few people. So university run Nightline. It's Nightline's a weird one. So Nightline's basically the way they train their volunteers is they get students similar to us, but Nightline just all they do is they run a day-long training course where they just do like mock sort of scenarios, and that's all the training they get. So to be honest, a few Nightline volunteers came over to us and said the training they got from Nightline was nothing like the training that they got with us, and they didn't feel fully equipped, which obviously can be quite dangerous, because if you get someone calling up and the call handler's not fully equipped to deal with the call, then you end up putting yourself in quite a tricky position. The reason why it's 6 p.m. until midnight is that's purely a resource point of view. So if you think about it, we've got to have 3 people on call between the 6 hours. Bear in mind everyone's students as well, so like they're working kind of in lectures and stuff like that throughout most of the day. So 6 p.m. until midnight is quite a good time. It's not late at night. We're looking to expand to make sure we're 24 hours, but it's purely we'd need about 300 or 400 volunteers to be able to do that. The shifts and stuff are purely just run by a few of us, so we organise all the shifts of the week. And why someone should call us? So obviously there's helplines like Samaritans, Mind, Calm, all that kind of stuff. They're all great. They do amazing work. But the key difference we found is people prefer calling a helpline where they know it's a bit smaller of an organisation. They know that everyone who's a volunteer is young, so we don't have any volunteers who are over the age of 25. So when you're calling us, you're essentially calling someone who's in a similar position to you. We accept calls from people of any age, but they've been mostly kind of 16 to 25 people who've been calling. So you're speaking to someone as if like I was speaking to one of you, just about having a chat with them. But obviously the call handler's trained to listen. Obviously we'll never give advice over the phone, we'll never tell you what to do. It's purely just a listening ear so you can kind of say whatever you want to say. Maybe if you don't feel comfortable speaking to your friends. I certainly didn't. I found it really hard to talk to my parents. My mum and dad don't know half of the stuff that I've just spoken to you guys about. I should probably maybe tell them. But I found it a lot more comfortable talking to strangers about the way that I felt, rather than people that I knew, purely just because I didn't want them to worry. So I feel like it's tricky to kind of encourage young people to just call a random number. It might seem a bit weird, and obviously Nightline do like a web chat service, which, I mean, would you guys, as a show of hands, would you rather call or would you rather do like a web chat? If you'd rather call, put your hands up. Definitely rather call. Yeah, so we consider doing a web chat service, but I just feel like if you're kind of going through a breakdown, if you're really struggling, you don't want to open your laptop up and start like typing. You kind of want to hear like a human's voice. So that's, yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
What mental health support do you have for your call handlers?
Yeah, so we work with a couple of charities, one called Changing the Game UK, and they essentially provide a safety net system for all of our volunteers. So they've got a kind of like a line of calls. So they'd first contact one of the line managers, who would then get in contact with one of like myself or one of the trustees. We would then have a chat with them, see what's wrong. They can be taken off shift at any point. It's not like they're forced to be on shift. And then we can refer them on to get counselling if needs be. We'll pay for their counselling. So we've got support systems in place. Obviously, it's tricky because they know what they're getting into. They know exactly from like the first interview question is literally like, you guys will be dealing with this. So they know from the outset. The training course is pretty like brutal. Obviously you have to expose them to kind of everything that they might deal with. But we've got support systems in place, and they're not forced to do it. Like they're volunteering at the end of the day. So for example, we've probably got a database of about 150 volunteers. of which I'd say 30 or 40 are regular, working like every single week, and then a few will kind of just drop in. They'll be like, oh yeah, I fancy working that shift. It's a really good experience as well. So it's they can put it on their CVs. A lot of people have gone from us into doing like psychotherapy courses and doing masters, that sort of thing. So we kind of help people to get that just initial experience, like first-hand experience, because it's quite hard to get within the mental health field. Did you have a question?
How did the first 3 people get your number?
They just found it on Instagram. So when we first launched, we purely just marketed it on Instagram. I'm sure probably everyone in this room is on Instagram. And they just saw it on there, and then they just called us. So they called. The line's obviously open at 6 o'clock. We probably had one call. We find most of the calls come in later on at night when people might be they're all university students. Maybe people might be out and then they've stayed in and they just want to speak to someone. But yeah, they find our number. We've got a website, which is streettalk.co.uk. And they just find our stuff on like Instagram. We're looking at different kind of marketing channels, obviously coming here, speaking to you guys. If you speak to your mates and just kind of like mention that we're around, that'd be great, because word of mouth is usually kind of the best way. But we've got loads of different kind of mediums. We're like TikTok. Is everyone here on TikTok? Yeah, literally everyone. Okay, yeah. It's like we're finding TikTok at the moment. It's quite like a big. I've got not a clue about it. Like I tried to make a TikTok the other day. It was awful. It's terrible. So yeah, we're trying to find different mediums to market it to people. But it's purely, I say marketing, that sounds quite like a businessy term. We don't make any money out of people calling. It's purely just for them to like come to us and help. Obviously we receive donations and stuff to help with funding costs. But as I said, it costs literally next to nothing to run it. But yeah, I take the calls as well, which is, it's one of the most like fulfilling things that you'll ever do. Like it's if any of you guys ever wanted to volunteer, like once you're done with your studies and stuff, then by all means just get in contact. It's genuinely one of like the best things that you can do. Obviously it's tough, it's pretty grueling, but it really is like one of the most fulfilling and satisfying things when you know you've made a difference to someone, even if it's like a tiny little difference, whether you've got them to stop crying on the phone or like they're going to reach out, they're going to speak to their mum and dad. Like it moves you genuinely. Do you have a question?
Do you have to pay to do the training?
No, it's completely free. Yeah, so it's completely free for everyone to do. It doesn't cost much for us to do. So I devised a training course from loads of different accredited courses. We're looking to get a blanket accreditation, but it's quite tricky because the course is made up of so many different aspects. What's mental is that most, so if you start up a helpline, you don't actually need to train the volunteers. Legally, you don't actually need to train the volunteers, which is pretty terrifying because like you could essentially just start up a helpline and people would call it, and with any randomer on the end of the phone. Obviously, we do train our volunteers to like a very high spec to make sure everyone's fully equipped. But yeah, no, it's completely free for anyone to volunteer. Anyone else got any questions, Mr. Beals? Ooh. Yeah, I'm not sure how much. Do you guys have like is there like a school counsellor, school therapist? Yeah, I think there was a school counsellor when I was here. It's a tricky one. It's at that point in my life I'd never kind of even considered like reaching out for help because there was a lot of stigma around it back then. I mean, obviously it was only like 5 or 6 years ago, but the amount we've come on from then until now is like crazy. Like Dr. Alex from Love Island stuff, like he's been a major push with government policy, getting mental health like taught in school. Do you guys have like a curriculum where you learn about mental health or like psychology and that kind of stuff? No, that might be a good idea. Yeah, I genuinely think from like D onwards you should be taught about how to cope with like panic attacks and how to cope with anxiety, depression. It would completely change people's lives, like people's like journey through school. The pastoral care obviously in school is good compared to other schools. Like at Brock College, the teachers didn't even know your name. Like they honestly just wouldn't care at all. So you guys are very lucky here. It's the teachers are really good. And obviously we're having like a housemaster, house mistress. You've almost got that like parental figure. But But yeah, I'd say education from literally the start of when you join Bryanston, even in the holidays as well, even if you had like a confidential line. I think, would you guys rather call a line that was associated to Bryanston or completely separate? Separate, yeah. So that's kind of why that's why Nightline I think struggles a bit, because people think that they'd call up Nightline and then they'd end up, the university would find out about it and they might get like, I don't know, something brought up in their like lecture or something like that. So I think, yeah, there's kind of having a separate organisation that is obviously regulated and just on call wherever, even if you recommended like Street Talk or any of the accredited helplines to answer calls and just have like that as a support service, even if it's 24 hours a day, even if you had part Street Talk between 6 p.m. and midnight, which obviously is probably the time that you guys would, if someone was struggling, like you have a bit of free time after prep, that sort of stuff, like if you're in your boarding house. I know obviously the younger years don't have as much free time, but it's around that kind of time that I think people would want to speak to someone. So yeah, I think that education. Yeah.
How do you work your budget? You mentioned you do fundraisers.
Yeah.
How do those? Do you pay people to train?
No, so we have an in-house training team. So we've got 2 managers who do all the training's online. So it's a course. You'll literally get sent a booklet. You make your way through the booklet, tick it off as you go. There's interactive videos, that kind of stuff. So no one actually has to physically I wouldn't be sat with you like talking. That would take like years. So that's how we manage it. With the budget, it's, as I said, to be honest, initially I just paid for it. It wasn't much to start it up. The actual switchboard service costs £36 a month to run, which is like nothing in the grand scheme of things. Insurance is not that much. And then you've got marketing costs, and that's literally it. So with the budget, I essentially just do all the accounts for it. But with fundraising, what we're going to look to do is so when you apply for funding, if you do government funding, you have to set out a budget and you have to set out like this amount will pay for this, which is what we'll do. So say we'll do, you see like a lot of campaigns being like £5 will answer a call for someone. That kind of stuff is usually quite helpful, so people know where they're putting their money. But yeah, you have to set out like a strict budget, like a marketing budget and that kind of stuff. But it's the most sort of cost heavy thing will be marketing, is in just getting people like to know about it. As in any business, their sort of biggest expenditures marketing. So yeah.
Do you intend on going back to uni?
I thought about it actually. So I was initially going to go back to uni and do a business course, and then this is why I said I was really happy when the pandemic came about, because it just completely put me in a position where I couldn't really go back to uni. So I started doing all this kind of stuff, but I want to become an accredited psychotherapist at some point. I was going to go into it initially. A good friend of mine is currently doing a course in psychotherapy. She absolutely loves it. I'd love to do it at some point, but at the moment I'm kind of on my own path. But when I'm older, I'd absolutely love to, because I went to counselling when I was a kid. My parents got divorced, which was the most like insightful thing. I'd recommend it to anyone if you need help. Like, go and speak to a licensed counsellor or psychotherapist, because it will completely change your life. They don't tell you what to do. They literally teach you ways in how you can manage your own like emotions and how you can manage just life in general. Even if you went to see one, if you're not struggling, like it will help sort of prepare you for life essentially, because it's tough. Like once you leave school, gap year, so much fun, but you're still kind of in a bubble of almost not really in like the real world. But once you start uni, you'll get a bit exposed to it depending on which uni you go to, but then after uni it's like real life will literally hit you like a steam train, and it's about kind of being prepared for it. It's amazing, like the freedom that you get once you've left university, once you get a job, like it's great. They say the school days are the best days of your life. I don't think they are. Like honestly, leaving, going to university and going out there is like incredible. So yeah, I might go back to university, who knows. Yeah. How long's I'd say anywhere between, depends. We get some like 5-minute calls, where it's just like someone needs calming down, someone's maybe having a panic attack and they get walked through some like exercises. Some calls will have for like an hour where they'll just be on the phone. They can literally call for as long as they want. Even if someone called at like 11:40, the volunteers are told to just stay on the phone with them for as long as they need. So yeah, I'd say probably roughly between 10 minutes and half an hour is the rough kind of call. But like that's literally all it takes to calm someone down if they're having like a panic attack or if they need just to speak to someone. Like it doesn't have to be a massive long like session of like being sat down. That's why I said like there's no forced group meetings. There's no like you don't have to go somewhere to go and speak to someone. You can literally just get your phone out and just call. And I promise you it'll like just completely curb any sort of like anything that would go further. So yeah, it's a good tool. So yeah, we're about 10-20 minutes. Anyone else? Mr. Beals?
One more for me. So, the units do enough, and are they doing more than they did when you started? Do you think they've woken up and
I think they're waking up. I don't think they do enough at all. I've got friends who have waited 6 months on a waiting list to speak to a counsellor at university. That was at Newcastle. The support systems in universities are pretty dire. That's why it falls on the NHS. So the average waiting time to see a counsellor at the moment through the NHS is about 6 months, unless you're high risk. So high risk is at risk of suicide. Unless you're in that category, you have to wait 6 months, or you go private, which I was lucky enough to do. So you pay about £100 an hour, anywhere between sort of £60 and £100 an hour to see a counsellor, and a lot of people don't have that luxury, so they end up just waiting on this NHS waiting list. So I think universities, there's endless amounts of things they could do. Firstly, education. I think like from the day you arrive in freshers, you should be given like you go here if you want support. It's 24 hours a day. Like they need systems in place where people can go straight from the offset of university, because like it's hard going to university. Like you're literally going to a completely new city. If you don't know anyone going to university, it can be tough. Like you've got to put yourself out of your comfort zone, and a lot of people just struggle with that. It's intense. Like it's an intense social environment. So I think definitely both schools and university need to kind of buck up their ideas a bit and get proper systems in place, and just ask students like what they want from the school, even if it's like an anonymous box or like an anonymous where they can send in being like, I want this. Like they should have the systems like that. You need to listen to young people and see what they want from their schools and universities. Yeah. Any other questions? All good?
Also, just one from
Yeah.
me. When you were in C, do you think it would help if you had someone in sixth form that you could have spoken to?
I think so, yeah. It's a tricky one because obviously I'm not sure if it's still, but when I was at Bryanston there was very much like a hierarchy. So if you were in C, the Bs would be like the ones bullying you a little bit, which was good. Like it was a bit of character building. But yeah, I think definitely, because I remember when I was in D, obviously I spoke about in the talk, when I had someone come up to me after an argument, they sat me down and they were almost like a mentor, and they were very good. It would almost be worth having a select few sixth formers trained up in just like basic, just listening, like active listening skills. All it took is him to just sit there and listen to me for like 10 minutes and then just completely calm me down. So yeah, I think it would be very useful to have sort of like sixth formers, or just someone who's not a teacher, because it can be quite hard. You're almost reluctant to go to like your housemaster or someone who's like a teacher because you feel like they don't understand you, which as much as they might want you to like be understood, it's a completely different age bracket, and like from my personal experience, I'd want to speak to someone who's my age, or at least like maybe a little bit older, like a couple of years older. So yeah, I think definitely having someone in sixth form who you could talk to, because like we didn't really have much of that. It was kind of just like you'd maybe try and speak to someone, but a lot of people just don't know. Even like peer to peer, like even in the same year group, you might speak to a friend, and as much as it's helpful speaking to a friend, they'll often give you advice and just relate it to like their own sort of experiences, but it's so key to not tell people what to do and literally just listen to them and ask them questions, just being like how can I help, that kind of thing, and just being like, how does it make you feel, and like it's simple questions like that will get people talking, and literally just talking about it usually curbs it. But it's good to hear that they've got like systems in place. I'm very happy to hear that. Perfect. Anyone else got anything? No? Thank you very much for having me, guys. Cheers.